Hey, this is Matt, and in this tutorial we're going to get into the looping assignment, and I'm going to show you how to do the looping and arranging in GarageBand. Many of these concepts you're going to be able to use if you do choose to use Audacity. You can use either GarageBand or Audacity, or GarageBand and Audacity. Let's take a look at an overview of what we're going to talk about here. So basically, building a preliminary track stack, what this is going to be for this project is at least 10 tracks that all work together at the same time. This is going to serve as your template from which you're going to draw sounds and then build different sections. So you're going to have two different sections for this song. It's going to be what I call ABA form. So it's going to have a beginning section, a middle section, and then you're actually just going to copy and paste the beginning onto the end. It's a classic type of song architecture that's been around for a long time. It works, it's cohesive, and it'll show your skills at arranging different sets of sounds and making them flow together seamlessly. So this track stack is basically going to be, the magic is going to be that it all works at the same time. In terms of the sounds, when played together on top of each other, all sound fantastic. The catch for this project is they're not all going to be played at the same time in the song. You can use roughly half the songs for the sounds for the A section and roughly half for the B section. And so I'm going to show you the referential database of loops within GarageBand. It's one of the coolest things about GarageBand just because there's so many different genres that you can put together and create all sorts of fun mashups. Give you a little overview of how time is going to be organized for this project, show you how to quickly and logically build track stacks that work from the ground up, starting with the drums and bass and then adding other elements, show you how to export these loops. And this is kind of a cool function because you can actually maybe come into the lab on campus, come into A303 or ATC, and use the computers that we have. If you're on a Windows machine at home, you can use our Macs and export some of the loops from GarageBand and take them home and arrange in Audacity. So the other key thing is to manage our volume levels here. And then we're going to get into arranging. So we're going to arrange an A section, arrange a B section, and edit our A section to create some antecedent consequent phrases. This is just a way to make loops a little bit less repetitive, because a lot of times when you just hit repeat forever with a loop, it can get a little boring. You can do some quick fixes to make it interesting for the listener. And then we're going to, once we create our A, B sections with these antecedent consequent phrases, you're just going to copy the A section over at the end and make the song, as I mentioned before, ABA form. And then I'll show you how to master and export in GarageBand. And of course, always remember to double check your final project. For this one, it's got to be a 16-bit 44.1 WAV file. Okay, so let's jump into GarageBand here. Looks like a guitar amp with a little guitar. One of the things that the newer versions of GarageBand does is it always pulls up the last project that was being worked on. So if you come to school, you might pull it up and jump into somebody else's project. So for this one, we're going to start with a new project, go to File, New, and then go to Empty Project, this icon here. And then select an audio track because we're going to be using audio loops here. And then let me give you a quick overview of the layout of GarageBand here. So in the top row, there are these buttons on the upper left, and these are quick links to the library of sounds. There's a help button. There's an editing button for the controls, what they call smart controls. This is for if you have any effects on your tracks or effects on the master, such as a peak limiter at the end, which is always essential. Use this button. You can gray it out or turn it light gray and it disappears. And then the scissors button is for editing pieces of audio, tracks or regions. So I'm going to go back to our smart controls here. And then this is called the transport up the top. It looks just like Audacity or pretty much any DAW with rewind, fast forward, stop, etc., play, record. And here's this cycle button here, which is a loop button. And then notice when I depress it, you get this yellow bar up at the top. And this is our loop, and you can use this to scrub different pieces of audio. You can put it in different parts of the song. You can resize it. It's set for 4 bars or measures here right off the bat. You can make it longer or shorter if you'd like. And then in here, you can see the tempo. One of the other cool things about GarageBand is you can alter the tempo after you have dumped your loops into the project, and they will all still seamlessly speed up and slow down together. You can do this in Audacity too, but it's a little bit trickier. And then over here, you can change the display mode. This is over in the far right-hand side here. If you go to time, you can see the length of time into the song. Avoid this mode for editing. This might be a view that you can use to make sure that your song is long enough for this project. But for the most part, we're going to be using Beats in Project. And just leave it there. That's the default. And then I'm going to deselect the metronome here because you're going to get sick of hearing that clicking on in the background. This slider here is the master output slider. Leave this at 0 dBs. Don't move it around. If your headphones are too loud, turn your headphones down. A lot of times people will be working on a project and their ears get fatigued and they reach for the slider to turn it down and forget it when they export the project, and it'll be really quiet, or vice versa. It might be too loud too. So leave that at 0. And then the one button that we're going to be using over here for the media browser is our Apple Loops. This is the big one, the loop-de-loop icon. And we select this, we get into their referential database. This is new. They have added some extra buttons here. You used to be able to search by instrument and genre at the same time. But if you click on this instrument icon, you'll see all these cool, fun instruments, and for each one, if there are tons of options. So if you go to, I don't know, pick something like a bass, and scroll down, you'll see there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of loops. You clear it out with an X in the upper left-hand corner, and then you can also search by genres or by moods. I'd avoid the moods icon, but the best way to work with this is to start with your instruments. And for this track stack, definitely best to start with maybe 2 or 3 drum tracks that all work together. So select all drums, and then you can go over to your genre button, and then maybe narrow your search down a little bit more by depressing one of these, for example. So let's actually go back to all drums. I'm going to clear that search. And let me show you a few things down in this lower window. So one of the key things you want to be looking for is how many beats each loop is. You'll see that most of them are multiples of 4. There's 8, 32, 16. And what a beat is basically a pulse. This is the underlying pulse of any music. And it's usually counted in terms of the tempo here, beats per minute. So most of these are 2, 4, 8, and 16 bar phrases. So what is a bar? Well, if you look up here in the transport, there's actually a bar counter, and what this pertains to is where your song marker is in terms of bars in the song. And a bar, for the sake of this project, is basically 4 beats. So it's sort of like cooking, where a cup has a quarter cup, a half cup, 3/4, and a full cup is a measure, something like that. But basically it's a measure. A bar is 4 beats. This is called common time or 4/4 time. This is where you see this icon in here. There are other options. Don't mess with those for this project. Let's just keep it in common time. The vast majority of modern popular music is in 4/4 common time. Okay, so you can see that if there is sorry, I just previewed that accidentally. You can see over on the left-hand side, some of these will tell you if this is a 12/8 time signature. It's an odd time. You can use those if you want, but it can be a little bit trickier to map them out into the right number of bars. But just go with most of all these other ones are basically 4, 8, and 16 bar loops in common time. So to preview a loop, what you do is you can just double click on it. Or you can arrow up and down. So all sorts of fun stuff there. When you find a fun one, you can just drag it and drop it into your arrange window. And this is how I want you to work for this project. Basically start with some drums that work together, and then you're going to add some bass, add maybe an organ or guitar, it's up to you. And then once you have 10 tracks together that all work at the same time, then it'll be time to start arranging. So let's go into a project that I've already built here. And this is one where I threw some loops together that were some different styles. We got some bebop drums, there's a jazz bass, there's kind of a country guitar thing. So I have my loop button on. This is a 4-bar loop. Let's just preview it. It's only 4 tracks. I'll show you one with more in just a minute here, but let's give it a listen. Okay, so it works together. Notice that I've adjusted some of these volume sliders on each track. Make sure that you manage your track volumes and that you aren't overloading the output of the song. Do that earlier rather than later. And these are global for the track, these volume settings. So let's see. The next step here. Oh, actually, so if you've previewed your loops and you like them and you're going to be working for example, Audacity, you can use the mute and solo buttons here to figure out what you're going to export. So you can use the solo button, looks like a headphone, and then set your loop marker here up at the top of the region that you want to export. And then you can go to Share, Export Song to Disk. And then I'm going to call this Bebop Drums. And you can select the file format. Here, I'm going to go with a 24-bit WAV. If I was going to work in Audacity, I'd probably want to use the highest quality. That's the highest quality. Make sure you select export cycle area. This will ensure that it is the exact length of that region when you export it. And then you hit export. Now let's just take a quick look at that. On my desktop, I've got this wave. Now, if I were to start working on Audacity, I can just drag this in over here, and I'll zoom out a little bit. And there you can see that my loop. So this is how you could work with GarageBand and Audacity. Export loops individually. You have to do it one by one and solo them out in GarageBand land. But it'll, in 10 minutes you can get them all out of there and work on a PC at home in Audacity. Okay, so let's get back to GarageBand here. So we've managed the track volume levels. You can pan them left and right if you want to. You don't have to for this project. And then what I really want you to do is build 10 that work together. So let me show you another project that I've built. And this one is going to have a lot more. I kind of went overboard. There may be 15 different loops that all work together. Notice that I've managed all of my volume levels. I have panned a couple of them. And this here is an 8-bar loop. So let me zoom in a little bit. And I just do that by pinching on my mouse pad here. So notice that some of these loops are actually pretty long. Like this synth down here at the bottom looks like it's an 8-bar loop. Some of these other ones are only 1-bar loops. The way that you can quickly get them all to lay out into an 8-bar phrase is you can drag loops from the upper right hand corner. You'll see that little loop button, and drag it out to the end of the phrase. So for this project, we're going to be working in either 8-bar phrases or 4-bar phrases. And what that means is sounds are going to play for 8 or 4 bars, and then new sounds will be introduced or certain musical events will happen. I don't want 3-bar phrases or 7-bar phrases. Keep everything clean and logical. As a listener, we've been sort of trained to accept certain new sounds at regular, even intervals of time. Okay, so let's give this one a listen. Notice I have my cycle function on again here. Okay, so what this track stack is going to be is our palette, and we're going to build 2 different song sections using all these sounds. So why did I have all these sounds playing at once if I'm going to use them to build 2 different sections? Well, the magic is if you use sounds that all work together at the same time, and in general, my theory is that when you move from one section of the song to the other, you as the composer, knowing that the sounds already work together, will make the sections flow together nicely, and it'll make for a more cohesive piece of music. A lot of times when people build a B section, it's like a brand new song, and it can be really distracting. So this is sort of an ancient composer's trick to use material that is actually from the A section or that would work with the A section, and then use it in the B section of the song. So I'll show you how to arrange things in just a second. So one of the first things you want to do is this track stack. I recommend, I'm going to rubber band it and copy it. This is just Command C. And then hide it at the end of the song. So I actually went and I've already done this in this song, but if you go to the end, you'll see a little arrow, darkened arrow. It's kind of hard to see in the upper right hand corner, and you can lengthen the end of the song. So then you can put your song marker where you want to dump something in, and then I redid it. So what I did is I'm just keeping my palette at the end of the song here. So if I ever delete tracks or decide to rearrange things later, I still have this to paint from. And then when I export the song, I'm not going to export this section. This is just sort of like a graveyard of sounds. Okay, and then what you want to start doing is using your solo buttons to figure out what track combinations sound good. I'm just going to sort of randomly click on some of these. This is maybe it's 5 tracks, and let's give it a listen. Okay, cool. So I might think, well, that's cool for a B section, maybe not what I want to use for the beginning of the song. But what I recommend doing is taking a screenshot of your of this portion of your screen, your tracks, which ones are soloed out. So I'm just going to do that really quick. Take a quick screenshot, just because I kind of like that one. You could name it like potential. Oops, here. I'm going to call it potential B section. And then this way you can keep track if you go and start experimenting with other button combinations for different things. And then you can kind of keep track of things that work together. And then you can always go back and then, for example, here's one that I did earlier of something that I thought might work for a B section. And so now I can see exactly which tracks I selected. And what I did with that actually is I started to build a B section later in the song here. And what I did is I soloed out the tracks I was going to use for it. And then let's see. So let's say I had 5 tracks, and then I just used I highlighted them and used Shift, and then I did an option drag and dragged it later in the song. So that, and then what I have over here, I'm just going to delete that. Right here is what's going to be the B section for my song. I haven't edited it down. This isn't the final product, but this is basically the roughly half the tracks from my track stack that I'm going to use. And notice where I dropped it in here. I dropped it at measure number 33, and there's a reason for that. What I'm going to do here is build a 32 bar A section. So it's going to be, 32 divided by 4 is 4 8-bar sections. And then what happens is the B section is maybe going to last for 8 bars or 16 bars. So here it's 8 bars, but if I want to quickly turn this into a 16-bar B section, I can just copy and paste that over. And then what I'm going to do at the end of the song is just copy the A section over. Okay, so now I'm going to take off all my solo buttons. And then the trick is I've got to delete the tracks that I was going to use for my B section here. So I might go in and systematically just sort of take these out. Looks like I use that one, and then I use this one here, and I use these 3. Okay, so now we have the remaining loops that we're going to use for our A section. So what you do is you just highlight these, and let me show you a mistake that a lot of people make right out of the bat. They start arranging their song by moving things around like this, and saying, I'm going to have some sounds come in over here and some sounds over here. This is a big mistake for this project, but definitely when you're producing and trying to get things done really quickly, you need to wear different hats, and when I mean different hats, I mean where you're right now. We're still in the playing producer and getting the loops together that work, and then we're going to start moving into the arranging. So what you do is you make sure you have your vertical track stack first before you do any arranging. Then you you say, okay, I'm going to keep all these loops and I'm not going to add any more. And then I'm going to switch hats and then start working and arranging and moving things over horizontally. Okay, so the other thing mistake that I see a lot is people will have sounds come in after 2 measures or maybe 3 measures. Don't do this for this project. We are going to work in very logical 4 and 8 measure phrases. Okay, so you can have something come in at measure 5 or you can have it come in at measure 9. That's cool. But I'm going to show you kind of a trick for composing, and this is loosely inspired by, I think it was Da Vinci. That there's some famous quote where when he was doing work on sculptures, that the actual sculpture was hiding within the rock, and all he had to do was remove the excess rock to reveal the statue down below. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all of my tracks. I'm going to actually copy and paste them over. And the reason I did that rather than dragging from the upper right-hand corner is when I get into editing these into antecedent consequent phrases, it's going to be easier to cut them up if they're already pre-sliced a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to copy it over again. Nice even 8-bar segments. And then what I'm going to do is this is basically going to be what I call the additive approach of composition, or sometimes it could be called stack and strip. That might be a little bit more precise for this in terms of the process. So what we did is we built our stack, and then I just mapped it out for the entire A section. And now what we're going to do is start stripping sounds out that we don't want in the beginning. So I might say I wanted a drum, just one drum beat in the beginning. Maybe I'll have some other drums. I don't want to have my synth lines come in yet, so I'll take those out. So maybe I'll start with a couple sounds. I don't want that sub bass yet. And then, so I'll start with maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3, maybe 4 might work, sounds, and then I'll introduce 1 or 2 sounds at a time. So here it looks like I have 4 sounds coming in. That's going to be way too much information. So I'm going to take a bunch of stuff out. Maybe one of these synth lines is going to be too much. So let's see. Let's say that might work. And then we can bring in one of these other tracks. Here I got, now my synth lead comes in. And then these funky Latin drums come in. So this is, in terms of composition, the other name for it is the additive approach, is that you start with a few tracks and then you add in logical 8 or 4-bar phrases new pieces of information. So you as the composer might get bored of listening to your project if it takes this long to introduce new sounds, but you have to have faith. As a listener needs to sort of live within a set of loops for a little while to get acquainted with them before they're going to be ready to hear a new sound. So you as a composer, you kind of lose the perspective of being a first-time listener. That's why I want you to kind of stick to the game plan and work in these 4 and 8-bar loops. It's been done for centuries. It's the way we've been trained to listen to music. And let's see. So, for example, sometimes I mentioned that you might want to bring something in after 4 bars. So I move this atmosphere up so it comes in after 4 bars. Let's listen to what I have in terms of the A section here and make sure it flows. Okay, that kind of worked. I took that synth out at the end just because, I don't know, it felt like the right thing to do. Okay, but basically there's an A section that works. You can always get in and do some more tweaks later. I've already dropped in what's going to be the B section, but you can basically play the same game with that. So you might say, oh, I don't want a synth in the beginning of it. I don't want this, maybe I don't need this abstract sound. I can have, maybe I'll start with the beatbox. and maybe take out this trance thing in the beginning of it. And then what I'm going to do is move my loop bar over just to scrub the transition between these two sections. This is the end of the A section. Oops. Well, I set my loop a little too short, but let's say, that might work. And then we have our full A section and our full B section. The next step to do is to edit some of these loops. So I'm actually going to go back to the beginning of the tune. And what we want to do is build some antecedent consequent phrases. And you'll see here that I've actually, a lot of these tracks, like in the beginning here, let's see, let's zoom out a little bit, let's just focus on this one, this ascension beat, where I've looped it twice. And these drum beats can get kind of boring sometimes. The easiest thing to do is to change the tail of the loop the second time you play it. So you play it once, you play it twice, and then you change the end. This becomes an antecedent phrase in the beginning, which means it comes first, and a consequent phrase, that comes second. It's sort of somewhat vague in terms of what you're going to change or how much of the end you're going to change. But I'm going to get in and change like the last measure of this one, last 4 beats. And the easiest thing to do is to alter the pitch, especially if it's a drum track, because you can pitch it up or down without having to worry about if it's in the key of the song. And it's kind of a nifty little trick. So you can set your song cursor right on the measure you want to make a cut. Then you do Command T, and then I have this little portion of audio that I can just edit alone without messing with any of my other loops. So how do I edit this? Well, I'm going to have to go to my edit tools up at the top. You can use your scissors, and then the scissors will pull up a track editor or a region editor. And a track is all of the sounds on that track. I really just want to do that one region. So when I select on region, you can see transpose. So I can actually transpose this up or down. So I'm going to transpose it up a few semitones, and then we're going to listen to the transition at the end of that phrase. And I'm going to solo it out. Okay, so that if you make enough of those little edits, I just did that on this one drum beat, but if you do this on 3 or 4 of the other loops where you get in and change the tail of some of the loops, it'll make it a little bit more interesting, especially because, hopefully this is going to be good enough that you're going to want to listen to it more than once. I always wonder, like, what is it about a piece of music that makes it worthy of listening to more than once? And a lot of times it's that there's more going on in it than you can really assimilate at one time. And a lot of it is this little attention to detail to phrases. So after you listen to it a few times, then you can kind of get into the background and the game that's being played with antecedent consequent phrases. So I recommend doing this to the B section as well, and then you're ready to complete the song. This is the easy and fun part. Oops, all you have to do is rubber band your A section like this, and I'm going to hit Command C, copy it. I'm going to put my play marker right at the end of my B section, and I'm going to paste it over. That's it. So my song is done. It seems almost like cheating, and that is it's not ideal, but there are a lot of songs that are this ABA song structure. It's called ternary form. It's been around for centuries. A lot of times you'll see maybe the last time that the second A section, you could go in and maybe add some new sounds or add some of those sounds back in that weren't there the first time, just so it's the same but different enough that it keeps the listener's interest. So you might want to bring in a loop earlier that you didn't bring in before, and then you can call it done. And then when it's time to export your song, you're going to want to use your your loop cycle yellow bar up at the top. Set it for the length of the tune that you're going to export. Remember, we have our little graveyard of loops over here at the end. So then I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the song, and then you go to share, and then you're going to go export song to disk, and you can select your audio format. So I'm going to cancel here because there's one thing that I didn't do that is very important. I didn't master the song. I didn't put a peak limiter on the output. This is one of the cool things about GarageBand is you can actually install a plugin that will prevent your final product from being clipped. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on any track here, and I'm going to go to my little knob editor in the upper left-hand corner. And then notice that there's a track button and a master button. So this is where you could go in and add different effects. So there's a compressor that you can add here, a channel EQ. You can add there are all sorts of other delays. We dealt with this in a previous week. So you can add effects to your tracks if you want to make them interesting. You don't have to. I recommend just keeping it simple. But what we're going to do here is, instead of working on the track, we're going to work on the entire mix all at once. And this is called the master track. You can see that preloaded in here, there's an EQ, a compressor, exciter, another compressor, and a limiter. I think the default is that maybe the EQ's on and the limiter's off. So what you need to do is turn the little switch on, or you can click over here under limiter. There's a little on the left-hand side. There's an on-off button. So turn the limiter on. If you click in the middle here, it'll pull up the gain and output level maximum settings. So I would just leave it at the default. You don't want your output level setting to be anything over 0. Otherwise, you could potentially have a clipped output. So when this is on, then you have your master, is the rough mastering. I have another cool video for mastering in Audacity. So you could export this like this and then use some other plugins in Audacity down the line. Okay, so let's go back to our share function. Export song to disk. For this project, I want a 16-bit CD quality waveform, and then you're going to name it your last name, assignment 4, and put it in a folder with your, so I'm going to go to a new folder. Create that and call that the same thing, and then I'm going to export which is the same as bouncing. Bouncing and exporting it's the same. They're synonymous. And then you can see I have my little my folder here. Make sure that you also have your GarageBand document saved in there too. Or if you're using Audacity, you have your Audacity and data folder in there. Okay, and then it looks like you're just about ready to go in yourself and have some fun. So message me if you have any questions, and see you soon.